Me and my friend have just made a bet. Our Latin teacher gave us a long list of words that we have to memorize for our test, and it's a really long list, right? There's 450 terms of Latin words that I need to memorize, but each word has 4 principal parts, and so actually I had to memorize like 1800 words. And my friend said, you can't memorize these within a week. But that's where he messed up, because I've mastered memorization. As students, we have to memorize a lot, and I mean a lot. Questions, equations, formulas, answers, chemical tests, maths equations, theories, concepts, dates. It's just a lot, right? But for me, I always like memorization from a young age. And I don't know if you guys have solved a Rubik's Cube before, but for me, when I was younger, I used to obsess over solving this, notably solving it fast. And the most common method is called CFOP, which stands for cross, F12, first 2 layers, OLL, and PLL. And to solve the cube after solving the first 2 layers, you have to memorize OLL and PLL algorithms. You have 57 OLL algorithms and 21 PLL algorithms. But these are long algorithms, right? Like, take a look at this. I had to memorize all these strings of letters, as well as the recognition, which is arguably even harder. And so I had to memorize this, like look at the year stickers and be like, oh look, this was like this hook shape, or this was like case 49, and I need to solve it by doing this one. So yeah, that's how you solve it. I had to memorize all that, right? And then actually doing it. So obviously it took like a while to remember, but I memorized all of them pretty fast. It's not an easy feat, you can agree, but unconsciously I just figured out how to memorize anything, and I applied this to my school life and studying, and suddenly memorizing concepts, dates, terms, definitions became all easy to me. Many students find memorization like the most daunting and boring part of studying, and that's why they tend to avoid it. But I'm going to be teaching you how to memorize anything quickly and easily, so that it becomes always something that's fun. Bro, I'm someone who used to play the Google memory game for fun, and I memorized random restaurant phone numbers when I was younger, so you better trust me. The first one is patterns. If I told you to memorize this sequence of numbers, 1, 3, 7, 15, 31, and 63, would you remember them? Many of you would just try to memorize like literally those 6 numbers, as you would just try to memorize any random 6 numbers. But some of you will have recognized a pattern, and as soon as you memorize just the pattern, which is just one thing, you know all the numbers. So for this one, it was you double the last number and you plus 1. You only had to memorize that one thing, but now you just know those 6 numbers and even more. There are so many patterns everywhere. In biology, if one thing increases, the other one decreases. For a load of people, they memorize 2 sets of information. They have to memorize double because they don't realize the relationship between things. But actually, you only need to memorize half of it, because everything in biology is a negative feedback relationship. For example, in dim light, your radial muscles contract and your circulatory muscles are relaxed. So in bright light, it's the opposite, obviously. Your radials relax and your circularies contract. It's the same in so many different things. Like if one thing contracts, the other one relaxes. If one thing goes down, the other thing goes up. Same thing for when I was memorizing algorithms for OLL. I knew some of the cases were actually just mirror opposites. So when I was learning how to switch pairs one way, I knew how to do it the other way. Trying to find patterns in revision is key, because also it's active recall. Even in subjects where you think a pattern doesn't exist, you can find them. For example, the occupation of Manchuria and Abyssinia during the 20th century are similar to me. Aggressively, the invaded place, League of Nations didn't take action, it was a failure. So trying to find these patterns makes it so much easier to memorize, because the thing is, they're all going to be different for everyone. Unless it's a clear cut, like in biology, it would be amazing if everything was like biology, when there's if one thing decreases, the other one increases, but it's not like that. But as you try to find your own patterns, and you start memorizing those instead of all those different terms, you're going to remember it for longer, because firstly, it's specific to you. You made that pattern, you found that pattern, but also your brain retains it for longer when you understand it and you see the link between things.
Hey, if you want to get good grades, listen up. I've got a video being released this Wednesday that reveals something huge. It's going to help you get the best grades in your class without having to study for hours, even if you're not naturally smart or you don't enjoy studying. You do not want to miss this. So click the first link in the description to sign up for my email list so that you can get early access. Do it right now.
The second way is questions. Memorization isn't a linear path from you knowing to not knowing. You have to constantly check yourself to see if you know it, to see if you've memorized it. Memorizing off information takes a long time, but memorizing off your mistakes is fast. So what does this mean? When I was memorizing Latin vocabulary, I use this website that lets me see the mistakes I make, and then after I go through all the list, it exports a list of only the ones I got wrong, and then you test yourself on those mistakes lists, and then again and again until you have none. And you've made it so that the number of times you have to test yourself is so much less, because say you just went through the whole list 450 times once, and then again, and then again, and then again. That's already 1800 times you'll have looked at the terms. But because this way, where you're only focusing on the ones you got wrong, It makes it so that it's so much smaller the amount of time which you're gonna have to look over them. And that's why you even use like an OLL tester for the algorithms on the cube. How can you do this for your subjects though? It's to make question and answer flashcards. When making flashcards, don't make them with terms and definitions, because for me, like terms and definitions, sure, there'll be like 1 mark in the test, but they're not actually like the majority of the things that the test is going to be testing. The test will have longer and more conceptual questions, so memorizing the question is important. That's why my physics flashcards look like this, and it's actually questions that will come up in the test. And you can actually use AI for you to do this by using this prompt, which I'll put on screen and also in the description. And then you paste your notes and it'll give you question and answers, and you want to be memorizing these, not the terms and the massive amount of information in the textbook, because there's so much stuff that you're never going to memorize it. And by filtering it once, by making it into question and answers, which will also come up in a test, it's like you've taken out 2 birds, like even 3 with 1 stone, and just memorize those and you'll be set. And the third thing is the crazier the better. As strange as it sounds, your brain memorizes weirder and weirder things, and that's why I memorized my Latin sex test. I made really goofy links and drawings on a PowerPoint, but it really did help. For example, I memorized them like using this, like these are some of the PowerPoint slides I had. Back to the cubing analogy, these 4 sets of moves, R, U, R prime, U prime, it's called a sexy move. Like I don't know why, but it is, you can search it up, it's called sexy move, R, U, R prime, U prime. And it's probably because like you can do it like really fast and stuff, but that's just like what it's called. And do this with the same with your subjects. Your brain is actually more stimulated when the thing you're memorizing is funny, violent, explicit. And it makes sense, right? Like in history, you're normally sleeping, but you somehow remember all like the gory facts. Whenever there's like sex facts, you always remember it, right? So use that to your advantage by creating funny image and links to whatever you're memorizing so that it stays in your brain for longer. That's why mind maps and creating drawings and images on the things that you've already learned make it a really effective way of revising, because you start to link an image to that thing that you memorize, and that's like the key way your brain actually memorizes things. Because say like you had to memorize the fact that an orange is orange without ever like seeing the color orange in your life, that's 2 more sets of things you have to memorize. You have to memorize the color orange that you've made up in your brain, but you also have to memorize the word. So by seeing it and creating an image linked to it will make it so that you remember it for a long time. And the last tip is to review. After you memorize the content, you should review the content straight after you wake up and just before you go to bed. The first reason is that there's a big gap between the times you review it, so it's spaced repetition. Many people can record things in short periods of time, and their short-term memory is good. And so by letting your brain process it and forget some of it, that's when you can test how much of it you actually know. And the second reason is that straight after you wake up is the time you're most alert and your brain hasn't been overloaded with stimuli. So by looking at it straight away, you're most likely to retain the information. And when learning occurs prior to sleep, the information learned benefits from consolidation during sleep. It's the last thing you learn, and your brain will retain it during sleep. And during sleep is when like the knowledge and all these things are formed. A study in Loughborough University concluded that your memories and thoughts are made and formed in your sleep. So by viewing something just before you sleep will make it so you can memorize it for extended periods of time. So now you should be a master of memory. So test it out and decide on one thing you want to try and memorize today, and utilize all these tips. Start by waking up and looking at it, then create questions and answers using the AI prompts and memorize those, and look for patterns and create images and visual text before reviewing it before you sleep. And now I can promise you remember that for a long time. As always, I'll see you next time.